You ever notice how some people just seem to get it when it comes to emotions? They know how to read the room, how to listen without interrupting, how to handle criticism without falling apart. And then there are others, smart, talented, even well-intentioned, who constantly trip over the same invisible wire in their relationships, at work, and in life. That invisible wire is emotional intelligence. It's not about how much you know, or even how hard you work. It's about how well you understand yourself and the people around you. The truth is, emotional intelligence can be the difference between building trust or breaking it, between solving problems or creating them, between relationships that thrive and relationships that fall apart. And yet, so many people don't realize when theirs is low. They're walking around with blind spots thinking they're doing fine while everyone else can see the cracks. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that. We're going to talk about 6 clear signs someone has low emotional intelligence. Not to judge, not to shame, but to become more aware. Because awareness is the first step to growth. And once you can see these signs, not only in others but in yourself, you can start making the changes that will completely transform the way you lead, the way you love, and the way you live. You know, one of the biggest challenges we face when it comes to personal growth isn't learning how to manage other people, it's learning how to manage ourselves. And here's the thing. You can't manage what you don't understand. People who struggle to recognize their own emotions are like ships without a compass. They might be moving, but they have no idea which direction they're headed. And when you don't know where you're headed emotionally, you're at the mercy of every wave, every gust of wind, every storm that comes your way. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone get angry, but when you ask them why, they can't explain it? Or maybe you've been there yourself. You feel irritable, snappy, maybe even sad, but you can't put a finger on the cause. You just know something is off. That's not weakness. That's a lack of awareness. And without awareness, we end up being passengers in our own emotional lives instead of drivers. The problem is when we can't identify what we're feeling, those emotions find other ways to show up. They leak out in the form of passive-aggressive comments, unnecessary arguments, or shutting down completely. And here's the kicker. It doesn't just affect us. It affects the people around us. Relationships suffer because others are left guessing what's going on in our heads. Colleagues feel the tension in the room. Friends and family start walking on eggshells. All because we can't, or won't, take the time to stop and ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? And why? Now, this is where emotional intelligence begins, not with how you deal with other people, but with how well you understand yourself. High emotional intelligence isn't about never feeling sad, angry, or frustrated. It's about noticing those feelings when they show up, naming them, and understanding what's driving them. Because once you name it, you can tame it. Imagine walking into a meeting after a rough morning. Maybe you spilled coffee on yourself, got stuck in traffic, and then opened your email to find 5 urgent requests before 9 a.m. without awareness. All of that frustration will bleed into the way you talk, the way you listen, and the way you respond to people. You might cut someone off mid-sentence or dismiss an idea without even realizing you're doing it. But if you can stop for just 30 seconds and acknowledge, I'm frustrated, I'm overwhelmed. This isn't about the people in this room, it's about the way my day started. You instantly give yourself power over your reactions. You create space between the feeling and the action, and that space changes everything. It's the difference between snapping at a colleague and having a productive conversation. It's the difference between storming out of a room and staying present long enough to hear someone's perspective. It's the difference between letting a bad moment ruin your day and letting a bad moment be just that, a moment. But here's the truth. Self-awareness doesn't just happen. It takes practice. It takes intentional pauses during the day to check in with yourself. Ask, what's going on inside me right now? And be honest with the answer. It takes journaling. It takes reflection. Sometimes it even takes sitting in uncomfortable silence until you figure it out. And yes, it takes humility, because you have to be willing to admit that your emotions, left unchecked, can cause damage. This isn't just about controlling emotions so you don't embarrass yourself in a meeting or blow up at your partner. It's about understanding the stories your emotions are telling you, because every emotion is data. Anger might be telling you that something you value is being threatened. You value is being threatened. Sadness might be signaling that you've experienced a loss. Anxiety might be warning you about uncertainty or risk. When you see emotions as data, they stop being enemies you have to fight and start becoming messages you need to listen to. If you ignore those messages, you keep operating on autopilot until started on autopilot. And autopilot is dangerous, not because it's always bad, but because it means you're not really in control. And when you're not in control of your inner world, you can't lead yourself, let alone anyone else. So the first step in growing your emotional intelligence isn't reading more books or memorizing communication techniques. It's building the habit of looking inward. It's learning to recognize when you're sad, when you're excited, when you're irritated, and when you're afraid. It's learning to call those feelings by name, because the moment you name what you're feeling, you take away its power to control you. And if you want to lead better, love better, love better, live better, you've got to start there. You've got to know yourself. Because you can't change what you don't acknowledge, and you can't acknowledge what you refuse to see. That's why the first sign of low emotional intelligence is not being able to recognize your own emotions. Because if you can't see you, you can't grow you. Another sign that someone has low emotional intelligence is their inability to take responsibility for their actions. And I don't just mean admitting when they've done something obviously wrong. Tone. I'm talking about that deeper level of ownership, the kind where you acknowledge not only what you did, but how what you did impacted the people around you. Because responsibility isn't just about saying, yeah, I messed up. It's about understanding that our words, our tone, our decisions, and even our silence all have consequences. When someone lacks emotional intelligence, admitting fault feels like a threat. They treat mistakes as proof that they're not good enough. So instead of facing them, they run from them. They shift blame to someone else, make excuses, or pretend the problem doesn't exist. And on the surface, that might protect their ego. But underneath, it destroys trust. Because the moment people realize you won't own your part, they stop believing they can rely on you. I've seen this happen in teams. A project goes wrong, deadlines are missed, and instead of saying, here's where I could have done better, some people start pointing fingers at the process, at the client, at other team members. And maybe they're not entirely wrong. Maybe there were external factors. But the moment you refuse to own your role in it, you send a clear message. I care more about looking right than about making it right. That's the kind of attitude that erodes collaboration and kills momentum. It's the same in personal relationships. You did that. If you've ever had an argument where the other person absolutely refuses to acknowledge their part, no matter how obvious it is, you know how exhausting that can be. It's not the mistake itself that damages the relationship. It's the unwillingness to take responsibility. Because when someone never admits they're wrong, they force everyone else to carry the weight of the problem. And eventually that weight becomes too heavy. Taking responsibility requires humility. It's saying, I'm human. I get it wrong sometimes. And I'm willing to face the discomfort of owning that because the relationship matters more than my pride. It requires the ability to separate your identity from your mistakes. Just because you did something wrong doesn't mean you are wrong as a person. That's the mindset shift people with high emotional intelligence make. They see mistakes as moments to learn, not moments to hide. And here's the thing, owning your mistakes doesn't weaken you. It strengthens you. People respect honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. When you can say, this was my fault, I should have handled it differently, you instantly create an atmosphere of trust. You show that you're not afraid of the truth and that you're willing to grow. Of course, taking responsibility also means acting on it. It's not enough to say, I messed up, and move on. The next step is asking, what can I do to make it right? Because ownership without action is just lip service. If you apologize but keep repeating the same behavior, you're not taking responsibility. You're just managing appearances. managing appearances. It's also worth noting that responsibility goes beyond just mistakes. It's about owning your choices, your habits, and even your emotional responses. If you lose your temper, don't blame a bad day or someone else's words. If you fail to follow through, don't hide behind the excuse of being too busy. Those explanations might make you feel better in the moment, but they rob you of the chance to improve. The moment you say, I'm responsible for how I show up, you take back control over your life. Taking responsibility can be uncomfortable. It can sting your pride. It might mean facing someone's disappointment. But the alternative is worse: living in denial, damaging trust, and repeating the same mistakes because you never learned from them. Responsibility is the gateway to growth. Kid growth. Without it, you stay stuck, pointing fingers while life passes you by. So if we want to build stronger relationships, if we want to grow into better leaders, if we want to live with integrity, we have to be willing to say those simple but powerful words. That was on me. And then follow them with the actions that prove it. Because here's the truth. Blaming others might protect your ego in the moment, but owning your actions will protect your future forever. One of the most telling signs of low emotional intelligence is a lack of empathy. It's not always intentional. Some people genuinely don't realize how disconnected they are from the emotions of others. But regardless of intent, the impact is the same. Relationships feel shallow, conversations feel one-sided, and people walk away from interactions feeling unseen and unheard. Empathy isn't just about saying, I understand. It's about genuinely trying to see the world through someone else's eyes to feel what they might be feeling, even if their experiences are different from yours. It's about listening, not just to the words, but to the tone, the pauses, the unspoken signals. People with low empathy miss those cues. They hear the words, but they don't catch the meaning. They respond to the surface, but they never reach the heart of the matter. When empathy is missing, interactions start to feel transactional. You say something vulnerable, and instead of a thoughtful response, you get a fact, a joke, or a quick change of subject. It's not that the other person is trying to hurt you, they just don't have the awareness to recognize that you're inviting them into something deeper. And over time, that lack of connection pushes people away. I've seen this in workplaces where leaders are more focused on metrics than on people. They notice when deadlines are missed, but not when someone's carrying a personal burden. They push for performance without pausing to ask what's behind a sudden drop in productivity. And while they might think they're being efficient, what they're actually doing is eroding loyalty. Or two. Because people will work harder for someone who makes them feel understood than for someone who only makes them feel measured. In our personal lives, it's even more obvious. When a friend is going through a tough time, they don't necessarily need advice. They need presence. They need presence. They need to feel that someone cares enough to slow down and truly listen. Without empathy, those moments turn into missed opportunities for connection. You might offer solutions when what they needed was compassion. You might minimize their pain because it doesn't seem like a big deal. To you. To you. And the result is the same. They feel alone, even in your presence. Empathy requires humility. It requires us to admit that our perspective isn't the only one that matters. It means being willing to step outside of our own experience and acknowledge that someone else's reality is just as valid, even if it's different from ours. That's not always easy. It's natural to filter everything through our own lens, to compare other people's struggles to our own, to measure their reactions against what we think we would do in their place. But empathy asks us to set all of that aside and simply be with the person where they are. They are. One of the biggest misconceptions about empathy is that it's a trait. You either have it or you don't. But the truth is, it's a skill. And like any skill, it can be developed. It starts with being curious. Instead of assuming you understand someone's feelings, ask them. Instead of filling in the blanks with your own story, let them tell theirs. Pay attention not just to their words, but to their body language, their tone, the things they're not saying. And most importantly, resist the urge to make it about you. Empathy isn't your turn to tell your similar story, it's your chance to help them feel heard in theirs. The irony is that people with low empathy often don't realize what they're missing until they're on the receiving end of it. Think about the times you've felt deeply understood. Maybe someone noticed you were off before you even said a word. Maybe they listened without interrupting, without trying to fix it, without turning the conversation toward themselves. It makes you feel valued and it deepens trust in ways words alone can't. And here's the deeper truth: empathy is not weakness. Some people avoid it because they think it will make them soft, or that they'll lose their edge if they get too caught up in other people's feelings. But in reality, empathy sharpens you. It gives you insight you can't get any other way. It helps you make better decisions because you're factoring in the human impact, not just the logical outcome. When empathy is absent, relationships, whether personal or professional, start to feel mechanical. People show up physically, but they check out emotionally. But when empathy is present, people lean in, they open up, they engage at a deeper level because they know they're safe to be real. And that's why developing empathy is so critical. It's not just about being kind, it's about being effective. Being effective. You can't lead people, love people, or even truly connect with people if you can't feel what they feel. Because at the end of the day, people don't remember how smart you were or how quickly you solved a problem. They remember how you made them feel. One of the clearest signs of low emotional intelligence is the tendency to react instead of respond. And at first, that might sound like the same thing, but it's not. A reaction is quick, impulsive, and often driven entirely by emotion. A response, on the other hand, is intentional. It's measured. It's measured. It's guided by thought, not just feeling. The difference between the two can make or break your relationships, your career, and your ability to lead yourself through difficult moments. Think about it. How many times have you said something in the heat of the moment and then, almost immediately, wished you could take it back? That's reacting. It's when your emotions grab the wheel before your brain even gets a chance to read the road signs. And it's dangerous, not just because it can hurt others, but because it can derail your own progress. A single moment of reacting without thinking can undo weeks, months, or even years of trust. The truth is, our emotions are powerful. They're supposed to be, they keep us alive, they warn us of danger, they connect us to other people. But when we allow them to dictate our actions without pausing to process, they become liabilities. That's when we overreact to minor inconveniences, misinterpret people's intentions, or escalate situations that could have been resolved peacefully. I've seen it happen in the workplace. A team member hears criticism about a project, and instead of asking questions or seeking clarity, they snap back defensively. Not because the feedback was wrong, but because the emotion, maybe embarrassment, maybe fear, spoke louder than reason. And here's the problem. In that moment, they've shifted the conversation from problem solving to damage control. The same thing happens in our personal lives. A partner forgets to do something we asked, and before we've even considered why it happened, we assume it's because they don't care. We respond with sarcasm, anger, or withdrawal. And what could have been a small conversation turns into a full-blown argument. Reacting is like pouring gasoline on a spark. It turns small issues into big fires. Responding, however, is like adding water. It takes the heat out of the situation before it has the chance to spread. So, how do we shift from reacting to responding? It starts with the pause. That pause is everything. It's that split second where you feel the emotion rise. Your heart rate increases, your jaw tightens, your mind starts racing. And instead of letting it explode outward, you take a breath. That breath creates space between the emotion and the action. And in that space, you can ask yourself a few simple but powerful questions. What's really going on here? Is my reaction going to solve the problem or make it worse? Most of the time, you'll find that the first impulse isn't the best one. Maybe the colleague who seemed rude wasn't being rude at all. They were just under pressure. Maybe the friend who didn't call you back wasn't ignoring you. They were dealing with their own crisis. That pause gives you the chance to see the bigger picture instead of acting on the small slice of reality your emotions are showing you. Responding doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, it means allowing your feelings to inform your actions without controlling them. It's about balancing emotion with reason so that what you say and do aligns with your values, not just your impulses. Here's something to remember: reacting is easy, responding takes discipline, it takes practice, it takes choosing to slow down in a world that's constantly telling you to hurry up. But the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. You start to notice triggers before they control you. You start to choose your words with more care. You start to handle conflict without letting it define you. And here's the unexpected benefit: when you respond instead of react, people trust you more. They see you as stable, dependable, and emotionally grounded. They know that even in difficult situations, you won't let emotions turn you into someone you're not. That kind of trust is priceless in both professional and personal relationships. The reality is, life will always throw situations at you that trigger strong emotions. You can't control other people, but you can control how you show up. You can decide whether you'll be the kind of person who adds chaos or the kind who brings clarity. And that's the choice in front of us every single day. Will we let our emotions run the show, or will we pause, take a breath, and respond in a way that reflects the person we truly want to be? Because in the end, reacting may feel satisfying in the moment, but responding is what builds the future you actually want to live in.